The Trump White House had set out on Friday to draw up their best case scenario for the big Mueller reveal over the weekend. It would have been pretty close to what actually happened here. This is about as good as the White House had hoped it would be. There were two central questions in this investigation, remember. One was on Russian collusion. Did any Americans or anybody affiliated with the Trump campaign help the Russians in their attempts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election? That was the first question. The second one was on obstruction of justice. Did the president or any of his staffers obstruct justice into the investigation into all of that? The letter that we got yesterday from the Attorney General, William Barr, provided some answers to both of those questions. First, on this issue of collusion, here's what Barr wrote in his summary of the Mueller report. He said the special counsel's investigation did not find that the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with Russia in its efforts to influence the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Now, on obstruction of justice, a little bit less of a clean finding from the White House's perspective. Mueller, apparently, in his report, does not conclude one way or the other whether the president committed obstruction of justice. But William Barr, the Attorney General, steps in here and in his own voice does make a conclusion. He says in his letter, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and I have concluded that the evidence developed during the special counsel's investigation is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense. So for the president's perspective, this is a clear win. Here's how the president reacted to this yesterday on his way back to Washington from Florida.
There was no collusion with Russia. There was no obstruction, and none whatsoever. And it was a complete and total exoneration. It's a shame that our country had to go through this. To be honest, it's a shame that your president has had to go through this before I even got elected. It began. And it began illegally. And hopefully somebody's going to look at the other side.
So now, according to Barr's letter, Mueller explicitly did not exonerate the president on this question of obstruction of justice. He simply did not come down with a decision whether or not the president did commit obstruction of justice. Nonetheless, Joe, the fight now is going to be over how much of that underlying Mueller report and the documents that support it can be made public. Barr has said he'll make as much of it public as possible, consistent with the law, which is a key caveat there, because a lot of this could be a grand jury secrecy related information. A lot of it could be classified. So there will be elements that he will not be able to release. But you can imagine Democrats and a lot of people around the country are going to want to read as much of this Mueller report as they can to understand why he made the decisions that he made that we learned about over the weekend.
Yeah. I don't, you hear about whether there was intent. That's what they're saying. There has to be proven of criminal intent. And it's just hard for me to figure it out why you would obstruct an investigation of something that didn't happen. So I don't know, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, you can obstruct. I mean, under the law, you can obstruct
there doesn't have to be a
an
crime,
investigation.
but what would be the motivation? What would be the motivation? Now I was talking about
I mean, you know,
when he said
it would be silly to do it, but it's silly to rob a bank too.
Right.
And people
When he
do
said,
that, right?
well,
So it could be a crime.
I know it could be a crime, but what would have been his motivation to obstruct something that he didn't do?
Who knows, right? I mean, panic, political fear. I mean, you know, any number of reasons,
I just think,
But
you know,
we don't know whether he did it or not, though. That's the question.
There will be grasping at. I mean, you've seen it. You're watching. It's impossible to discuss this in a sort of a reasonable way with, especially on social media. But I did see that you said weekend. What time was that? That was horrific.
It was a late night on Friday night because we had a lot going on.